This is the final British ultimatum handed to the French on July 3rd of 1940 before attacking their naval forces at the Mediterranean base Mers-el-Kabir in Algeria. Using rare archival footage, we'll see how Operation Catapult unfolded and touch on these questions. Was it necessary for Churchill to take such drastic action? What options did the French realistically have when faced by this situation? And finally, in hindsight, should the Germans have managed the end phase of the war against France differently? At the end, I've added a clip of high-quality, relevant archival footage. So stick around. It's worth it. I promise. With the French surrender to the Germans at Campaign on June 22, 1940, the British found themselves in a precarious position. Although they'd successfully managed to evacuate 338,000 soldiers, one-third of them being French, from the beaches of Dunkirk, had the Germans followed up quickly with a successful landing operation in Britain, the war, most likely, would have been decided. Churchill accurately commented at the time that wars are not won by evacuations. While the British were aware of the deteriorating military situation in France and engaged in discussions with French leaders, they did not have complete or specific knowledge of the conditions of surrender prior to the actual signing of the armistice. The situation was fluid, and information was limited, especially concerning the exact terms being proposed by the Germans. By this date, it was also clear to all that any agreement signed by the Germans simply wasn't worth the paper it was written on. Britain found itself alone and on its back heels. Their only advantage was a superior Royal Navy. For Churchill and his war cabinet, the risk of the French warships, the second strongest navy in Europe, falling into enemy hands was paramount. On July 3rd, James Sommerville, the British commander of Force H, passed on the following signal to French Admiral Gensoul at Mers-el-Kabir. It is impossible for us, your comrades up to now, to allow your fine ships to fall into the power of the German or Italian enemy. We are determined to fight on until the end, and if we win, as we think we shall never forget that France was our ally, that our interests are the same as hers, and that our common enemy is Germany. It continued, giving three options. Number 1, to join up and continue the fight against Germany. Number 2, sail to a British port and hand over the assets. The crews would then be repatriated. Number 3, sail them to a French port in the West Indies and have them demilitarized. It finished stating, "If you refuse these fair offers, I must, with profound regret, require you to sink your ships within 6 hours. Finally, failing the above, I have the orders from His Majesty's government to use whatever force may be necessary to prevent your ships from falling into German or Italian hands." The French themselves were in a predicament. Their army had been humiliated, and in some quarters it was even being said that the Jews were responsible, that they were the cause of the rot from within, which led to the otherwise inexplicable collapse. This played into the German hands by paving the way for many French to actively join their cause. If you can't beat them, join them. Regarding the French fleet, the newly signed armistice stipulated that the fleet would be largely disarmed and confined to its harbors, remaining under French control. The agreed-upon non-German occupied zone of France would be governed by the French and considered a neutral country. Agreeing to any of the options offered by the British would have been a clear breach in the terms of the armistice and could lead to the resumption of hostilities, which would result in the occupation of the remainder of the country. The French Admiral Gensoul replied in writing to what was seen as a British ultimatum that under no circumstances would his ships fall into the German or Italian hands. Ominously, he added, that force would be met with force. The ships that the British were about to fire on were crewed by men who had been their allies just 10 days earlier. Understanding the difficulties, Churchill instructed the Admiralty to send the following message to Sommerville. You are charged with one of the most disagreeable and difficult tasks that a British admiral has ever been faced with, but we have complete confidence in you and rely on you to carry it out relentlessly. While negotiations between the two admirals continued, a little after 1 p.m., the British dispatched swordfish planes from the carrier Ark Royal to mine the harbor entrance. This action angered Gensoul, who felt that the British were acting in bad faith. Despite the heightened tension, for the time being, all remained calm. At 4:45 p.m., Sommerville received a communiqué from the Admiralty, which considerably raised the stakes. It stated that he had to settle the matters quickly, as French reinforcements were on their way. He wasted no time. At 5:15 p.m., Sommerville sent this message to the battleship Dunkirk. The French failed to respond. The negotiations had failed. Action stations were sounded. The situation had spiraled out of control. Apart from the French Navy, all branches of the French military had been soundly defeated by the Germans. Were the British now really prepared to destroy what remained of French power? Then the first salvo from the Hood's 15-inch guns smashed into the side of the French battleship Britannia, causing fatal damage. She sank with the loss of 977 crew members. For 15 minutes, H-Force's guns ranged down on the French fleet in the harbor, causing death and destruction. The French had been badly mauled. Apart from the sinking of the Britannia, the Dunkirk was crippled with 200 dead and many injured. The destroyer Provence had run aground, and the destroyer Mogador was badly damaged. This engagement had certainly damaged Anglo-French relations. The result was shock and resentment towards Britain within the French Navy and in the general public in France, and on July 8th, Vichy severed diplomatic relations with Britain. But was it the French or the British that had lost the most in this action? Actually, although not directly involved, it was probably the Germans. This turn of events was welcomed by the Germans, but also unsettling. With the successful completion of the campaign in the West, in Berlin and in most other capitals, it was expected that the war would soon be over. Britain couldn't possibly hope to continue on alone. In order to ensure their empire, they'd have to come to terms with Germany's dominance on the continent. This is what Hitler wanted and understandably expected to happen. This British operation showed that they were willing to go it alone, that some kind of negotiated peace would be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. The decision to negotiate the armistice, allowing Vichy France to be self-governed and maintain possession of their fleet, was intended to allow Germany to only need to keep a relatively small military presence in occupied France, which it did. This would free up the majority of the German Wehrmacht to wage war against the Soviet Union. In Hitler's mind, a massive struggle in defense of Western civilization. Had Germany better understood Britain's motivations, the end of the war against France could have been handled differently. Would fully defeating France and occupying the entire country have left Germany in a more advantageous position to win the current war against Britain, rather than looking ahead to the next war? That would have allowed Germany to have a much larger presence in the Mediterranean, and with a concentrated effort, probably would lead to the capture of Egypt and the Suez Canal, and a successful end to the North African campaign. The way to defeat Britain was not by direct invasion, but rather by cutting off its extremities one at a time. In any event, this would have avoided fighting the two-front war which led Germany to its destruction. Might Churchill have been more willing to negotiate in 1940 if he'd known that standing up to Hitler alone would cost Britain its empire? As the Battle of Britain was raging later in the fall of 1940, he stated, "If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour." He believed in the empire and thought that Britain was fighting in its defense. Some historians argue that the operation did not significantly change the naval balance of power in the Mediterranean, and therefore didn't affect the outcome of the war in a meaningful way. Let me know what you think in the comment section. And now, here's a clip from Wochenschau number 687 from November of 1942, which shows the German occupation of Vichy France.
In den Morgenstunden des 11. November an der deutsch-französischen Demarkationslinie. 7 Uhr. Auf Befehl des Führers treten deutsche motorisierte Verbände den Marsch durch das unbesetzte Frankreich zur Mittelmeerküste an. Deutschland beantwortet damit den englisch-amerikanischen Überfall auf französisch Nordafrika und kommt der geplanten Feindlandung an der südfranzösischen Küste zuvor. Auf der Straße Toulouse-Carcassonne. Marsch durch Narbonne, 12 Kilometer vor der Mittelmeerküste. deutsche Wehrmacht kommt nicht als Feind des französischen Volkes. Sie hat nur das eine Ziel, jeden amerikanisch-englischen Landungsversuch zurückzuschlagen. Marschpause. Auf der Straße nach Marseille. Treibstoff für unsere Luftwaffe. In Marseille.
If you like this kind of content, which integrates different primary historical sources, open a free account on our website, military1945.com, and stay informed. Patreon supporters preview all videos uploaded to YouTube and get regular access to footage that can't be shown here.
Am Triumphbogen. Deutsche Soldaten stehen an der Küste Südfrankreichs. Sie gegen jeden feindlichen Angriff gesichert.